Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. It began with a letter I shouldn't have received. I was sitting in my flat in Liverpool, early November, rain on the window like ticking clock hands, when the envelope slid under the door. No sound. Just the cold brush of damp paper against wood. I assumed it was a bill or some advertisement, but the envelope had no return address, and it was sealed with a wax stamp in the shape of an eye. I turned it over in my hands for a long while. There was something old about it, not in age, but in intention. The paper smelled faintly of salt and lavender. The ink was dark, handwritten in a narrow, curling script. You are requested at the house beyond the fog. Your presence is expected on the 13th, bring only what you can carry. Come alone. At the bottom, a signature, M. Ellery. I had no friends or family by that name. I should have ignored it. But that night, and the next, I dreamt of a pale house standing on stilts above a marsh, half submerged in gray water. It had no windows, only narrow slits like eyes carved into the walls. In the dreams, I stood at the edge of the reeds, unable to move, the sound of slow, wet footsteps behind me. Every time I turned to look, I woke up. By the fourth night, I gave in. The train took me as far north as the tracks would allow, a final stop called Wainmere, a forgotten village hugging the coast, where the sea and land blurred into fog. The station was more like a shed. No taxis. No reception. Just a dirt path winding away into the mist. An old man was waiting there. He wore a fisherman's coat, the kind yellowed by years of salt. He said nothing, only nodded once when I stepped off the train. Then he turned and began walking. I followed. We passed houses that looked abandoned, but every so often, I'd catch a curtain twitch, or a flash of something moving inside. The fog made it hard to see more than 10 feet ahead. Time seemed different there, elastic. I couldn't tell if we walked for 20 minutes or 2 hours. Finally, the man stopped at a wooden dock stretching over brackish water. A boat waited for us. No engine. Just oars and silence. We rode through the marshes, and the fog closed around us like a jaw. I first saw the house only when we were nearly upon it. It rose out of the water like a fossil, gray wood slick with moss and age. It stood on thick wooden stilts, each one leaning at a slightly different angle, like they had grown rather than been built. The structure swayed faintly in the wind, or perhaps it was the water beneath it moving. No birds. No sound. The man docked the boat. Still silent. A ladder led up to the front door. I climbed. When I looked back, the boat was already retreating into the mist. The door opened by itself. Inside, the air was still, but not stale, like the air in a church no one had entered for years. There were no lights, yet everything was faintly illuminated by the same dim gray as the fog outside. And waiting in the hallway was a photograph. A picture of me, standing on the dock, taken moments ago. The photo sat in a simple wooden frame, leaning slightly against the wall table. I picked it up. The image was sharp, too sharp, as though the lens had captured not just my figure but the very air around me. I hadn't seen a camera, hadn't heard a shutter, and yet there I was, staring off toward the fog as though waiting for something. I left it there and stepped further inside. The house had no clear layout. Hallways looped back on themselves. Doors opened to empty rooms, then later to different ones. The furniture was sparse, a high-backed chair here, a tarnished mirror there, but always arranged in pairs. 2 chairs. 2 candlesticks. 2 empty picture frames on the wall. Everything seemed to wait. The strangest thing, my footsteps made no sound. The floorboards, though visibly warped with age, made not the slightest creak. It was as if the house did not want to acknowledge my presence, or worse, that it already had. After some wandering, I found a bedroom. The bed was small and narrow, barely larger than a cot, with sheets so white they seemed untouched. A book lay open on the bedside table. I leaned over to look. It was a journal. And the handwriting was mine. I picked it up with a shaking hand. The first page was blank. The second read, "Arrived today. Don't remember the journey. Fog swallowed most of it. I feel like I've been here before. The house feels familiar, but wrong, like remembering a dream too clearly. I keep seeing myself in the corners of mirrors. Not reflections. Just another me, watching." The third page had a stain, like something had dripped on it. Ink or something darker. I flipped ahead. There were more entries, dozens of them. Pages written in my voice, in my phrasing, describing events that hadn't happened. At least, not yet. The bells rang again last night. There is no bell. I heard my name whispered under the floorboards. The door across the hall leads to the room I was just in. And on the final page, "Do not trust the one who looks like you. He is not here to leave." I dropped the journal. Outside the window, a figure passed by. Identical to me. And smiling. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the bed, staring at the door, which never moved, yet never stopped feeling watched. At some point in the early gray hours, I stood and opened it. The hallway beyond was wrong again, curving in the opposite direction it had the night before. The walls seemed damp. The wallpaper breathed when I walked past. I found a staircase that hadn't been there before. At the top was a locked door with no handle, just a keyhole shaped like an eye. I leaned in. On the other side, I heard voices. My voice. Speaking backwards. Suddenly, footsteps behind me. Slow, measured, bare. I turned, nothing there. But the sound continued. Closer. I backed up against the locked door, reaching into my coat instinctively, and found a key I didn't remember taking. Cold as ice. Smooth as bone. I looked at it. Then at the keyhole. Something in the door breathed, softly. Waiting. The key fit perfectly. Turning it was like twisting the silence itself. A low, grinding sound echoed from behind the door, but when it finally swung open, there was nothing but darkness inside. I stepped through and the world shifted. The air grew colder, heavier. The faint light from the hallway vanished entirely. I could no longer see my own hands. Then, a voice, soft, distant, and trembling, spoke my name. It was coming from somewhere deep inside the blackness. I walked forward, each step slow and deliberate, until I felt something brush against my cheek, a cold wetness like sea spray. The floor beneath me changed too, soft earth replaced wood, and the walls dissolved into twisted reeds swaying in an unseen wind. I was standing in the marsh from my dreams. The fog clung to my skin like a cold shroud. I looked around. The house was nowhere in sight, only endless marsh and dark water stretching beneath a leaden sky. Then I heard the whispers. They were all around me, soft and fragmented, words half-formed in the mist. "Come back, stay with us, remember the pact." I shivered and tried to turn, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, the reeds clutching like fingers. Ahead, shapes began to take form, ghostly figures wading through the water. They had no faces, only blurred outlines of bodies and eyes that gleamed like distant stars. One stepped closer and raised a hand. I felt a chill seep into my bones as a voice echoed in my mind, "You are one of us now. The house is your memory, and the marsh your truth." Before I could respond, the figure reached toward me. I stumbled backward, the ghostly figure's touch like freezing water seeping into my skin. The whispers surrounded me, growing louder, voices layered atop each other, repeating phrases I barely understood. Remember, remember, remember. The fog thickened, blurring the shapes until they seemed to merge into one vast, shifting form. And then a memory surged inside me, not my own, but a memory that felt like it had been buried deep. Long ago, a man stood in this marsh, making a pact with something ancient and forgotten. A promise to guard a secret, to bind his soul to the house beyond the fog, to never leave. That man's face was mine. Or rather, it should have been. Because I was not the first. I was only the latest. The mist began to pull away, revealing the wooden house standing tall in the distance, like a beacon of sorrow and forgotten time. I wanted to run, to escape the marsh, the whispers, the voices inside my head, but the reeds clung to me like chains. I heard a door creak open behind me. The house was calling. The figure, or something behind it, spoke one final time before retreating into the fog. You belong here. The house waits. And the house remembers. With no choice left, I turned toward the distant silhouette. The journey back was slow, each step heavier than the last. I passed through the locked door once again and found myself back in the hallway, but the house was different now. The walls pulsed faintly, like a living thing breathing beneath the surface. And somewhere deep within, I knew my story was only just beginning. The house whispered. Not in words, but in memories, echoes trapped in the wood and plaster. As I walked the halls, faint voices brushed past me, fragments of conversations, laughter long gone, sorrow seeping from the cracks. One room held a faded portrait of a woman with eyes like storm clouds. When I looked closer, I saw my reflection staring back from behind hers. The air grew heavier, pressing on my chest like a weight. I felt less like a visitor and more like a shadow cast by this house, part of its long, tangled history. Suddenly, the walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in rhythm with my heartbeat. I pressed my hand against the wood, and a chill raced up my arm. A voice, soft and mournful, whispered, "Find the window. The key is in the glass." I searched the house until I found it, a tall window overlooking the marsh, smeared with salt and fog. The glass was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, but as I touched it, the cracks began to glow faintly, tracing lines that formed a symbol, an eye within a circle. I remembered the keyhole shaped like an eye. Holding my breath, I pressed the glowing cracks with the key I carried. The glass melted away like smoke, revealing a narrow passage behind the window, a hidden stairway spiraling down into darkness. I knew I had to descend. With only the dim light from the fog outside, I took the first step. The stairway was narrow and spiraled downward like a coil tightening around me. The air grew colder with each step, thick with the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic. The fog outside faded into silence, replaced by the slow drip of water echoing from the depths. At the bottom, I found myself in a cavernous room carved from stone, walls slick with moss, pulsing faintly as if alive. In the center stood an altar made of blackened wood, scarred with symbols I didn't recognize but somehow understood. A circle of flickering candles surrounded it, though no flame danced within them. And on the altar lay a mirror, its surface dark and rippling, like water disturbed by a single drop. I approached the mirror with hesitant steps. As I looked into it, the ripples stilled and my reflection appeared, but it was not quite me. It smiled first, then winked. The eyes glowed faintly, and the room seemed to tilt. My reflection whispered, "You cannot leave. We are bound." Suddenly, a cold hand gripped my wrist. I tried to pull away, but the hand was part of the mirror, or rather, part of me. The surface shimmered and began to pull at me, like quicksilver dragging a stone. I fought to break free, the whispers from before swirling into a cacophony inside my head. Then, with a final, shuddering breath, I was thrown backward. I lay on the cold stone floor, heart hammering, the mirror's pull fading but its voice still echoing in my mind. The house was no longer just a place, it was a presence, alive and hungry for me to become part of its endless memory. I stood, feeling the weight of countless eyes watching from the shadows. The journal, the photograph, the locked door, they were all parts of a cycle. A cycle I was trapped in. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a flicker of defiance sparked. If this was a prison, I would find its key. I returned to the journal, flipping through the pages that felt more like a map now. Among the cryptic entries, one line stood out: "The key is not outside, but within, the truth you deny." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Memories flooded back, moments I'd buried, fears, regrets, and the loneliness that had led me here. The house fed on that loneliness, but it could not hold me if I remembered who I truly was. I opened my eyes, the room clearer, the shadows less dense. I touched the mirror one last time. It cracked, not with breaking, but with releasing. The mirror shattered inward, like a ripple in water, and the darkness inside the room began to dissipate. I felt the grip on my soul loosen, the house's hold weakening. For a moment, the walls around me became transparent, revealing the faces of those trapped before me, eyes filled with sadness but also hope. I whispered to them, promising I would remember and not be forgotten. The house seemed to sigh, a deep, ancient breath escaping its timbers. The fog outside started to thin, light seeping in like dawn. I climbed the stairs back through the hidden passage and found myself once more in the hallway. The door I had entered through was now open, letting in fresh air and the distant cry of seabirds. Stepping outside, I watched the marsh transform as the fog lifted, the water gleamed under a pale sun, and the reeds swayed gently in the breeze. Behind me, the house stood silent, no longer alive, just an empty shell waiting for the next visitor. I turned away, feeling the weight of the past still heavy but no longer binding. As I walked toward the distant village, I carried with me a strange calm, a memory of a house beyond the fog, and the knowledge that some stories never truly end. The sky stretched wide and pale above me, the air soft and still. The world seemed to breathe in a slow, steady rhythm, like the steady beat of a calm heart. I walked along the marsh's edge, where the water met the reeds, and the light spilled like silver on the gentle waves. The house beyond the fog was gone from sight, but its story lingered like a whisper on the wind, quiet, patient, waiting to be told again. In that moment, I felt a deep peace settle over me, a gentle weight that was neither heavy nor light, but simply there, like a memory folding itself into a dream. And as my eyes grew heavy, the marsh's soft murmur carried me into a sleep filled with shadowed light, where endings and beginnings entwined, and the fog held its secrets close. Good night.